Thank you for that. To all of our officers here in support, thank you for your time. And there are no members of the public. I do have one public question that I will deal with shortly. So let's move straight on to apologies and substitutions. There is one substitution, and that is Councillor Mosdale is substituting for Councillor Brodie, and we welcome you, Councillor Mosdale, to our meeting, and thank you for substituting for Councillor Brodie. He's unable to be here. The minutes of the last meeting we need to confirm as true.
So can I just raise a thing with the minutes, please? What we've had is some multiple recommendations come forward in various minutes of meetings that haven't been actioned. So I wonder if it's possible to produce at the end of the minutes a list of actions to be delivered. For instance, I mean, last time we met, Councillor Mosdale raised that the fact that that agenda was particularly thin. For instance, is there an action following that recommendation? It's a very weak one, but I say there are circumstances in other meetings that minutes have led to actions to be done that have not happened. I think it would allow some continuity between meetings to establish what jobs we're still to achieve, having previously discussed them.
I think it's a very good point, Ed. We will discuss how we can. We'll take that away, and we will put something into effect that deals with that. Councillor Bacon and then Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just say, if we're going to do that, which I think is a very good idea, we should actually make sure that part of the meeting is agreeing the actions, because there can be a hell of an argument later. Did we agree to do that or not? So if we actually can have agreed actions, then we can follow them through.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. I would just say to anyone watching, we do have the opportunity as a committee to meet informally. We do that. And in general terms, we do run a consensus, which I'm very pleased to say. Councillor Stevens.
Councillor Bacon's already brought forward what I was going to suggest. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Garrett. We do need to confirm them as a true record. Councillor Jarman. You propose that. Thank you so much. I need a second. Councillor Quirk. Those in favour of approving these minutes, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you. We will now move on to declarations. Thank you, Councillor Jarman. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Garrett.
Yes, I'll declare a non-pecuniary interest in the matter relating to the Pan Mugger later on, the lease on that, as I am a Newport and Carisbrooke community councillor.
Councillor Jarman.
Chair, I believe we've got a running dispensation as we discuss the dips, so we don't have to declare interest on the dips. It does include several things in my ward, and I'm guessing in everybody's ward here in some way is affected by it.
Thank you. That gives me the opportunity, Councillor Jarman and Councillor Garrett, to say there is a standing dispensation on the dips. And for clarity, I too am involved. I have an interest in land in Ryde, but there is a dispensation, and on that basis, I will continue to participate in the meeting on the dips. Thank you all. Public question time. There are no members of the public, so I have one written public question. It's from Jenny Wade on behalf of the Ryde Society, and it says this: can the committee confirm whether the proposed allocation of Ryde Town Hall, a grade 2 listed building, for partial redevelopment into sheltered housing within the draft island planning strategy has been assessed for consistency with policy EV1 and the National Planning Policy Framework on conserving heritage assets? And question 2 is, will the committee support a review of this allocation to ensure that any future development of Ryde Town Hall protects its listed fabric, retains civic and community use, and aligns with the council's wider heritage-led regeneration objectives for Ryde, rather than treating it as a generic brownfield site. What the Ryde Society would like to do, and I will summarise this, is make a public statement. I'm prepared to accept that as part of the questioning. And they say this: the Ryde Society wish to make a public statement regarding the proposed allocation of Ryde Town Hall for redevelopment into approximately 18 sheltered housing units. While we support the council's objective to meet housing needs, this allocation is unsound and inconsistent with policy EV1 and national planning policy. Partial redevelopment risks harm to the building's historic and civic value, leaving sections unused and structurally vulnerable. We respectfully ask the committee to recommend removal or amendment of this allocation in favour of a heritage-led reuse that protects the listed building, retains community functions, and supports heritage-sensitive regeneration in Ryde. And I will give, not tonight, I will give a full written reply to Jenny Wade on behalf of the Ryde Society to those questions. What I would say is that we absolutely accept their questions, understand their interest and concerns for the building, and this will be discussed later on this evening in our meeting when we come to the draft island planning strategy, which is item 6D. There are no other public questions. We have members' question time. Do we have any members? Councillor Love.
Thank you, Chair. Will the committee confirm that the settlement for the floating bridge replacement is ring-fenced? And if it is not ring-fenced, will this committee move to ring-fence it, as we believe has been previously stated?
Thank you, Councillor Love. Let's ask our officers for a response to that, please.
Thank you, Chair. The settlement is not technically ring-fenced. However, because that falls within our current policy that was approved by full council in terms of not ring-fencing any capital receipts unless by statute. However, the Director of Finance, Section 151 officer, has given assurance that until we know the outcome of the further works and potential recommissioning of a new floating bridge, that money will stay intact. It has not been allocated for anything. It remains in council reserves, and so it is available to go towards the floating bridge. So in essence, it is ring fence, but it's not a technical ring fence, and that's an accounting issue.
Councillor Love, I think I hear the answer. It's not ring fence, but it's barbed wired. Councillor Love.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me a second question. I'm asking this committee, it should not be in the hands of officers. It's a councillor decision about whether if this funding is ring fenced or not. And if we choose to make it ring fenced, we as a council can do so. It is not for officers to make a decision, as was suggested then, that it's down to the deliberations of a 151 officer. In fact, this council and this committee can make a decision to ring fence it, and I ask that you do that.
Thank you, Councillor Love. What I would say in answer to that is that I'll come to you, Kerry, is that we will regard this as part of our budget process and take due consideration of that under that process as we move through to the budget. Kerry, is there something you want to add to that?
No, I mean, we can certainly undertake that we could change the strategy, which will eventually be approved by full council at the budget setting, to specify that that particular fund is ring fenced. But until that happens, the full council decision from February last year still remains in place. That doesn't allow us to technically ring fence at this point in time. But we can deal with that through the budget process, as you suggest, Chair.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Councillor Love. I think that's a commitment and an undertaking to certainly build a wall around it even, maybe, we'll say. Any further, Councillor Jarman?
It's a follow-on really from Councillor Love's question. Can we have the assurance that the interest accruing on that money, as part of the floating bridge settlement, is also barbed wired? I'm not too sure what the phrase was earlier, and added to that sum and maintained in that barbed wired account? Thank you.
Is that an undertaking you can give us?
Yes, we can do that.
Good news. Any further questions? No further. Look, let's move on to item 6. It's the decisions we have to make and some noting. Item 6A is our service performance and improvement. Quarter 2, it's pages 9 to 256. The recommendation is that the committee note the operational and financial performance of the Corporate Resources Directorate as included at Appendix 1 to this report, and receive for information the performance appendices concerning the other service committee areas. And I propose that as a recommendation. Look for a seconder. Thank you. Councillor Garrett seconded. It's open to questions and comments. Councillor Jarman.
So on page 10, section 9, we note there that the days lost to sickness, we don't actually have a target. And yet on page 14, where the 2.73 figure is down, we do state a target, which is 6.5 days. I wondered which was correct. I'm assuming that we can resolve that quite quickly. I'd like to use today, if I can, just to resolve a few things rather than coming to full council at a later date. It would help if we could just clear them up. They are small things, but anomalies.
Okay, I'm happy to respond. I'm just looking for the page of the detail. Did you say that was page 14? What? 10?
Page 14 in small print at the bottom is the 2.73 with a target 6.5 under it.
The 6.5 is the target.
All right, so the text is on page 10 where it says, basically, we don't set a target.
I'll follow that up. I'm not quite
There's
clear
something about
why
the-
there's a disparity, but we do set a
fall
target.
short of.
We do set a target and the target is 6.5.
All right.
And that's what we monitor against.
And thank you. And my second question on this would be on page 16, where we note that there were 4 occurrences of a cyber attack on a third party. And I just think it would be worth us confirming and airing in public whether or not any council data or any resident or business data was exposed during those 4 attacks.
I can answer that one. No council data was exposed as part of those risks. So the measure is where we are made aware of any vendors that are used by the local authority have been subject to an attack. And then we do an investigation to try and understand if there has been any impact on council data. So I can report that no council data was compromised as part of those reports.
Thanks, Glenn.
I knew the answer already, Chair, but I just think it's worth putting out in public because it can worry residents if we note in a document that there's been successful cyber attacks and we don't say what the result of that was. That's almost to Councillor Blake's question earlier, that consequences of information can be more important than the information itself.
Thank you, Chris. Ed, I'll come to you after Chris. You okay? Yeah. Chris.
Going to the risk assessments, The financial risk says that we're assessing our financial risk for this year and for next year as medium. Yet we had a briefing only a week or so ago that would suggest that there are significant budget pressures this year that will go on to next year, and that there aren't reserves to cover that difference. Oh, sorry. There's not the reserves to cover any shortfalls. So I would have thought that we're probably in the realms of it being a bit worse than medium, and maybe it's a high risk, maybe not a very high risk, but certainly I think we're moving into the territory of high risk now.
Thanks, Chris. It's Kerry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The risk for the in-year monitoring position is still medium at the moment because we are forecasting pressures. They're not pressures that are absolutely going to occur. We do have the corporate contingency as well, which will offset a large amount of the pressures which are currently being forecast. We're sort of straying into the next report as well slightly, but I'll cover it now. Essentially, the key task now for directors is to try and mitigate the risk as much as possible to the end of the financial year. And if we cannot mitigate, then we will, at the moment, based on the figures that we're looking at Q2, we would need to withdraw approximately £1 million from reserves at that point in time. But as I say, they're not pressures which have actually all of them are not with us now. They are forecast pressures, and there is still time to put that mitigation in place to bring it within the amount that we've got in the corporate contingency, which would alleviate the need for any further withdrawal from reserve. So that's why that one's still medium. In terms of the setting the budget, the second risk, as you know, we're still in sort of like the middle of the process. And until we've got all of the information regarding the settlement, etc., we're working through as responsibly as we can in order to provide sufficient coverage in terms of savings and mitigation of pressures to be able to deliver a balanced budget. So it's a little bit too soon at this stage in the processes for both the in-year and also setting the budget to move that risk up to high.
Thank you, Kerry.
And just to add to that further, Councillor Quirk, the strategic risks are under review in the next quarter in order to be reported through to audit and governance. So our work on the budget, both in year and through budget forecasting, will keep that strategic risk under review, and it will be reviewed and updated for the next audit and governance anyway.
Thanks, Wendy. Any further questions? I know that Ed.
Just a very quick comment. First of all, Kerry, I'd hate to see the set of circumstances that would lead to a high risk when this one's pretty bad and it's only a moderate. It's a bit worrying. Anyway, my second comment is that I just want to thank officers for the piece of work they've done to label the statutory requirements in this paper. It's would have been a big bit of work initially. Hopefully, not so much going on, but it's very helpful. So thank officers for that.
Thanks, Ed. So, Chris.
So this is a follow-on from a question that I actually asked at another committee very recently, which is about targets. So in most of the documents we've got here for performance, we measure against a target. It's true in almost all of the documents we've got before us. The area of adult social care and housing is an area which doesn't record targets in the document. So it has a performance figure in that it says what the actual number is, but it doesn't say what the target is. Now, maybe there are no targets, which would be somewhat interesting. But for example, in terms of those people who are in temporary accommodation, that's remained remarkably consistent at around 250 for quite some time. It doesn't seem to change. We do seem to continue to spend money on that. Of course, we have to, but there's no target for what it should be. And my question is, can we know what the targets are? Because I have to believe that every area of the council has targets. And I understand that it's demand driven, which is the answer that came up before. But if we don't have targets that what we're trying to achieve, it's very difficult to us to say what a correct allocation of budget to achieve that target would actually be. So I'd suggest that targets are very useful. We have them for almost every other area in the document, but it would be nice to have it for particularly the housing issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Would you like me to come in here as chair of that committee? And the answer that was given by our DAS was that actually that will never be zero. We can never have a zero target because people will always be on the housing register, people will always be moving, we will always have people changing the type of accommodation and the need that they have. The reason that there is no target is because actually it is such a movable feast, trying to deal with that. And it is something that you'll never reduce that amount of people, however much housing you put in place, because of the way there's. But I do think what would be fair is to get that answer that was given at adult social care by the DAS, as she's not here to reply today, and then have that sent to this committee. I think that would be the fair way of dealing with it, because otherwise I will be putting words into her mouth and a summary of what she gave, which was a very exceptional answer on that evening.
Thanks, Claire, for that clarification. Chris.
Just following on from that, although people would always come in to top up the housing list, and there will always be new people becoming homeless. One thing that is missing from the stats is the number of people who have moved from the housing list into permanent long-term accommodation, or off of the emergency housing situation into proper long-term accommodation. And that to show that we're actually making some progress, will actually demonstrate that there is progress. If we got 58 houses coming up in the next few months, Horsebridge Hill, one would hope to see that 58 people will move out from one list to the other, not that it all goes on being sold off. So I think that would be quite useful to have a metric, even if it's not a metric that you can predict. You can actually measure what you have done and what you have achieved.
Chris, I guess the comment on it might have been, who was it? It was you, Chris. The numbers of families in temporary accommodation is fairly constant. Our approach has been to provide, this is just temporary accommodation, provide temporary accommodation, and it's fairly widely known that temporary accommodation is a combination of caravans and hotel rooms bought to put people in temporary accommodation to ease them out of the emergencies that they find themselves in. But those people do move on. We don't know the numbers, but they move on. But this total number seems to remain reasonably constant. It's around 200. It doesn't seem to change. What I can say is that we have started, I know adult social care is not here this evening. What we have started to do is acquire properties for the first time to provide temporary accommodation for those families that currently would be in temporary accommodation. And we've done that by buying homes up and offsetting the costs against the temporary costs. I have no doubt that eventually those numbers will reduce the number of average families in temporary homes. There is no reason why it should not be the case, because that number remains constant, but we will be having permanent accommodation to put some of those families in. Permanent temporary accommodation. Let's have to be careful. Claire.
I think that's very wishful thinking, actually, and I don't think this is probably the right venue to have that discussion. It really should sit under my committee, but I do think that we do need to give that a real serious health warning that whatever this council does, the changes that are affecting private landlords, there are more and more private landlords that are being driven out of the market. And if you are now having private landlords that would have national insurance being taken on their income from their rental properties, even more will be driven out of the market. So we can do the utmost that we can as a council, but I think those numbers, as much as we make as much effort as we possibly can, we're going to see those rise and rise quite drastically, because there are lots of people who are private rented accommodation, but private landlords are going to be leaving in droves if they are not already, which they have been. And that's why we've been seeing that flow of numbers. We're doing our bit, but I think it does need to sit within the other committee as well.
Clear point, whilst it is under adult social care housing, the cost of providing that is fairly and squarely on this committee to find the money to do that. Ian?
This isn't about the financials, it's about the emotional bit. I think that Councillor Mosdale's quite correct with what she's just said about the numbers. But I also feel that the way that the staff in adult social care and in our housing and homelessness section work to prevent people from becoming homeless, it should be mentioned at the same time within this chamber this evening, because there's a lot of work done by a small team, which actually provides, if you like, a little bit of hope and how can I say, support for those that are almost becoming homeless because of what Councillor Mosdale said, but due to the expertise, the talent and the fortitude and application of our staff, some can be avoided. And I'll leave it at that. But that comes at a cost as well, Chair. What we've got to say is that, you know, adult social care in all areas has an expense, not just to the individuals out there, but also to this council and the council taxpayer. It doesn't come cheap. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I'm going to ask Councillor Spink to speak, Councillor Jarman, and then I'll come to you after. Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 points, if I may, on that, on this issue about temporary accommodation. One of the concerns is the amount of time that people spend in temporary accommodation and families, and it might help if we had a target, or if not a target, at least what we considered, which I suppose would be a target, in fact, is a reasonable time. I think from memory, there are some families that have been in temporary accommodation for 2 years or more. So there should be, it seemed to me, a figure could be given as either as a target or simply as a report as to how many people there are in temporary accommodation who've been there for, say, over whatever period of time, and how that's changing. The other thing is that, if I may, with your indulgence, Chair, raises that at Planning Committee, I did ask, and it's being considered, whether or not we could be told that when a planning consent is built out, how many people that planning consent takes off the housing register. Because Planning Committee is often told that we should be granting this consent because of our housing crisis, and our housing crisis is effectively really our housing register. It may go beyond that, but it certainly includes our housing register. And I'd like to have more knowledge, and I think others would, as to how effective our planning granting of permission is in taking people off the housing register. So I wonder if the committee would consider those 2 aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. I'm not sure if you want to make a comment. I could see the difficulties in that. Is there anything you'd like to add? We'll certainly consider it, but I can see the problems in doing that. Reporting numbers is less of a problem, I would suggest.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to what Councillor Spink has said there, yes, that's a request that has been made, and officers from the local planning authority are working out how to do this. And as I'm sure you'll appreciate, this talks to the lifetime of a process. So the planning part of it is just one part, and we move through. So what I know that James and the team, amongst everything else that they've been doing at the moment, has been doing is to coordinate with those other service areas within the council to try and best we can provide some answers to those questions that Councillor Spink has raised. And the intention is to do that at the earliest opportunity at hopefully at the next Wednesday workshop of the Planning Committee.
Thank you. Councillor Jarman, I'll come to you, Ian, after.
Covering it up. There was just one point I wanted to make on the schools issue. I'm happy that Adrian's with us this evening. And then I wanted to come on to a further question, perhaps after Councillor Stevens has spoken about the PFI contract. So on the school documents themselves, on the reporting, which I went through quite carefully, and if I look particularly at page 78, I noticed that the school population appears to have dropped by some 300 in the year, although the number actually being electively home educated has gone up by 100. So does that reflect that the actual number of children on the island has gone down by 200? Or is it that they're simply going to school off the island? Or does it include, for example, Ryde private school numbers? I can't imagine that they've taken on as many as 200 additional ones. It's just to explain the difference between 300 apparently dropping out of the school system, 100 going into private education and 200 vanishing.
Chair, just a quick point of order. I don't disagree with the point Councillor Jarman's made at all. However, we did make some kind of agreement that we would only discuss the report content that was outside of the committee's remit. So therefore, effectively the first section of this. And we would agree that those KPI scrutinies would go to the relevant committees. I don't disagree with Councillor Jarman's point at all, but I thought we had come to that agreement.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. The point well made, and I accept that, and I think you're right. We should move on.
Suggestion.
Yeah, we're going to. Wendy's going to speak. No, I can see you champing at the bit, Ashley. Oh, you're not. No, okay.
I was just going to say, taking on board the point that Councillor Blake has just made, we've got the question noted. We'll arrange for a full response to be provided to Councillor Jarman, but copied to this committee as well. In any case,
that's helpful. We appreciate that.
Final point, Chair, then I also fall foul of the same argument, which is regarding the PFI contract. And when I looked through the document, we do not have performance indicators for the PFI, the financial element of the PFI contract. So in terms of the milestones and the deliverables and the costs of the debt, all of those factors relating to the financial elements of the PFI are not in the summary we've got here. They may go to another committee. I appreciate that. I haven't seen that, but I haven't noted them in another paper. They're certainly not in this one. And I wondered where those KPI issues and performance indicators for the PFI contract are indeed reported, if indeed they are. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jarman. Colin, do you want to just respond to that briefly?
Yeah, sorry, trying to get the microphone to work. Yeah, Councillor Jarman, you'll recall that we've set up a briefing for the ERTI committee in December to discuss the PFI contract. And one of those elements will be the financial performance. The other elements obviously will be performance in general, and the other elements will be regarding what you want to see in terms of how you would measure a good PFI contract. And that then will lead into a committee briefing, which is coming on 22nd of January, which will take the results of that briefing and have that discussion in public.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy with the answer. I know that there are a very high number of KPIs related to the performance of the contract, and I can imagine that will be quite a robust and lengthy paper, but thank you for that.
Thank you both. I think the point you may be making, Chris, is that if there are financial risks, this committee would want to know about them. If there are operational risks, it's the ERTI committee. I think it's very clear. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment about this request to compare developments with the housing list. And I can remember, or must be over a year ago now, talking to a developer who said that 85% of his development had gone to islanders. So that means there's 85% of those empty houses now are still out there. So maybe those empty houses that the residents have moved out of, you know, how do you relate that to the housing list? You just can't, can you? You know, it's as simple as that. It's a very difficult thing to achieve, to equate the two. Thank you, that's it.
Ian, there is data on empty houses. It's a small number, I shouldn't say that. It's a couple of hundred from memory, something like 300. But we do have that data. We certainly, Ian used to get it as cabinet member, but we do have that. I think Wendy's got it up in front of her, in fact.
I think that to follow on the point that I think the Council was trying to make is that those 85 houses could be filled by non-island residents. They could be filled by a second homeowner. They could be filled by a whole manner of
People off the housing.
Yeah, or people on housing list. And so it's a very complex number. And simply noting empty houses or a reduction in the housing register wouldn't achieve the figure that we're looking for.
So in terms of private developments, at one stage we created a policy, I think it was a 5-year policy, a 3-year, 5-year policy, where there had to be an association with the island for them to, this was in you remember that? We did that, but on private developments, without that kind of condition, you can't guarantee who a private developer is going to sell their house to, Ed.
Be that a point as it's actually missed the point I think we're trying to make. It's not the house that the new development, the new house, it's they've come from somewhere. They haven't magically appeared into that house. And the house that they've come from, somewhere in the ecosystem, is either housing another islander, which we'd hope, but it could also be hosting a mainlander. And therefore, in effect, it wouldn't have mattered in terms of the numbers if a mainlander had gone straight into the new house.
Not sure if I understand that logic. But,
Wendy does.
The housing is an interesting, maybe not for here. Like, it's an interesting discussion. The housing market is it used to be called the housing ladder, housing market. And you've got chains. As anyone that's bought and sold a house will know that. The chains, and those chains should be short, small, or whatever. But somewhere down the road, I hear this about people go on the Rightmove. I see commented and say, there are 2,400 homes on Rightmove on the Isle of Wight now. Why do we need houses? But they're not available. People are living in them and selling them, and people are moving into them. As you'll rightly say, if it's not first time, Ed, they may well be coming from another property that is then available for somebody else that's coming from another. Somewhere down the ladder, somebody is buying a house for the first time and not moving out of a property, but it's complex. Claire.
Perfect example. I think we're asking officers to measure the immeasurable. It's a movable feast. So I'll give a perfect example. I have a member of my family at the moment who is buying a property. They are a part of a chain. There is 6 in the chain. If you saw me run out just now, I was dealing with it, sorry. But they have never been on the housing register. They won't have been on the housing register. And actually, I can't wait for their room in my house to become free. But you are, but you are measuring the immeasurables sometimes, because lots of people on the housing register never register because actually their only aim is to stay at home. Lots of us do have young people still there who are saving like mad to try and buy their first property. I just think we need to make data and stuff we collect and not something that's immovable, and not, you know, otherwise we're going to give somebody, could you collect this data? But actually it is probably impossible to collect and be precise and accurate on that data.
Thanks, Claire. Look, I'm going to move on. We've had a fair say at this. I've proposed a recommendation and seconded. Those in favour, it's for noting. Those in favour of noting, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you all. We'll move on to the financial monitoring question 2. This is page 257. The recommendation is that committee notes the financial performance of the council. I need a seconder, please. Thank you. Councillor Garrett seconded that. It's page 257 to page 270. Any comments, any questions? Councillor Mosdell.
Quite happy to move forward with noting the report, but I do want some assurance. I was setting the agenda this morning for the Adult Social Care Committee, and we have put, part of that agenda that we will have someone from financial officers to come and discuss the budget process and the way where we are now financially with that committee. You can imagine being adult social care and where we are with the budget. It's really important that that comes to the committee and we have those open and frank discussions. So I just want that noted, because at the moment we don't have an actual commitment to come and speak to those committees as part of our current financial and budget process. And it would be nice to set that in stone, please.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Jarman.
So a couple of questions on the spreadsheet. So if I go to page 263, public health has got 3 nice zeros along it, which is an interesting row. I'm sure it's not that we're not spending any money on it. It's the fact that the money is ring fenced. So we're coming back to this ring fence topic again here. Is it the case that the ring fenced money is never reported on the spreadsheet and the financial data that we get? Because if it is, that's why it's 0. In which case the implication would be that there's other ring fence money which is being spent that we're not hearing about. Or is it the case that ring fence money is reported on the spreadsheets that we get, in which case why is public health 0? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, all monies are reported on the spreadsheet. The public health one, the ring fence grant is dealt with over a period of time that can be longer than 1 financial year. So with public health grant, if the expenditure and the grant income match each other, therefore there's a net nil budget. These are all net budgets. At the end of the financial year with public health, if there's a variance, so if they've spent more than their budget, there is a public health reserve which is held, which is the way the public health grant mechanism works. There will be a withdrawal from that reserve to bring the net revenue in year position back to 0. If they don't spend as much money in year as they've received in grant, then there'll be a contribution to that reserve at year end. So whichever way it works, it's always a net nil impact on the council's general fund budget. And it's programmed that way so that it works over potentially, a longer period of time. It's a more medium term approach with public health, because it depends on their commissioning cycles, for example, and what particular programs they've got. So they may draw more money out one year and put more money back in the next year, but it's just managed like that every single financial year. So it'll always look like it's a net nil variance.
Carrie.
Can I therefore suggest that where we have a budget, which is effectively the ring fenced amount that we're going to spend in that fiscal year, that is included in the fiscal budget year, and the outturn would be the result of actually spending the money. The variance would then be 0, as you said, so that we actually know, rather than seeing a 0 figure, we know that we are spending something on a particular topic, and public health is quite important, and that we know what that figure is. Otherwise, we have no visibility to it here as a committee.
I think there are some challenges in that, Councillor Jarman, in that you can correct me, Kerry, if I have this wrong, but it's using the word ring fence for the discussion we had earlier about funding for the floating bridge, and ring fence money for public health, which comes as a separate grant from National Health England. And within that grant, which is ring fenced to this council, to be spent on public health issues, comes statutory duties also that have to be spent. That's not for the total amount, but it's conditioned by that.
Yes, I also would believe that there is more detail provided in the financial reporting that goes directly to Adult Social Care and Health Committee. So the detail on the particular spending areas of public health will be shown in those reports.
Just one more question on this one, which relates to the floating bridge. So it's a bit of a common topic, isn't it, these days? I just noted that unfortunately the column I can't say other than it's about 2/3 of the way down. It's called floating bridge. We had a budget of 780 and the forecast outturn currently is 945 with a variance of 165. So is that the forecast outturn for this fiscal year in terms of the totality of the contribution that this council will make to the operations of the floating bridge, i.e. the 780 plus the 165?
Yes,
Do
that's
you have
correct. Yes.
Ton of money.
Can I just further ask and Carrie, so that's for this year. Is that the same? We won't know the exact numbers, but in general, is that the same for every year?
The base budget will be carried forward into next year, subject to whatever the outcome of the piece of work that's currently being undertaken is around the future of the floating bridge, and then the appropriate budget will be set.
I think the point, thank you. I think the point I was perhaps making was that there has been some exceptional spends on the floating bridge in recent times. That's reflected in one particular annual budget, but is not something we would expect. As we hear, we've corrected all of the operational mechanical problems with the vessel, would not be expected in the future.
Yeah, as part of the budget process, Chair, we are looking at the overall cost for maintenance and for staffing. There may be a reduction in maintenance given the investment that's been made over the past few years. We don't know what that quantum is yet, but we are looking at to see whether that can be reduced. The estimate is possibly 100,000 less, but we need to get confirm that.
Thank you. That's just the narrative that circulates is the floating bridge is costing this council just a short step away from £1 million a year, and my understanding is it's nowhere near that actually. But yeah. Ed.
Chair, I note in the budget for under ERTI, there's an allocation for £250,000 for A305 options appraisal that as of yet remains unspent. I just wonder if there's any plans to spend that money, because that is a rather important piece of work. Yeah, of course. So in the budget under the ERTI section, there's a line for an A3055 options appraisal, which £250,000 remains unspent. Just querying as to with plans to spend that, because that is a rather important piece of work.
The grant fund.
Yeah, but that's something, again, we'll pick this up at the PFI briefing, because it's one of the things that we've asked Island Roads to look at in terms of developing a business case for the A3055 at site 14 and site 15. I think that's what that funding covers. But also, as you appreciate, Councillor Blake, we are doing some work around Ventnor in general with significant resources, and we're looking at a project manager to help deliver those.
I'd note that the whole A3055 is of significant note to the whole island. Going from Ryde all the way to Freshwater is one of our probably our most important road. It's certainly in terms for our tourist economy, it's the most important road, and it has multiple problems on it. And you start with Ryde. There's flooding issues in Ryde, Brading flooding issues, again flooding issues through into Sandown through to Lake. Ski Bridge there is currently having work done to it. Leeson Road going on through. There's still a break in the A355 at Undercliff Drive that needs reinstating. There's also the ongoing management of the military road, which is still the A3055. So that road is strategically important. So I'm very keen to see that money spent, because it's been put in there, and we're hard pushed for any money, and that is a very important piece of work for this island.
There are, do you want to speak again? There are some complexities of the PFI contract on one of those sites. Chris.
So following on from what Councillor Blake has just done, if I call your attention to page 266, which happily does actually have reference numbers on this page, and item 48 is the A3055 at Afton Down. I wonder if we I wonder if we could identify what the 100,000 is for that's committed. And I see we've still got 299, which I assume will be for implementation of the barriers and the other safety measures which are proposed. Thank you.
That's correct. The 299 is for the barriers, safety measures, and the additional monitoring, which has been required on the road.
Thank you. Very good to have that assurance. Thank you.
Thanks. Any further comments on this? Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at page 264, and it's 3 or 4 lines up, and it's let's find it. Corporate finance items. And there's a savings there, forecast of £2.161 million. And I'm just wondering how we've managed to save that. We haven't closed the department or anything. I'm not being rude, but it's a hefty chunk, Chair, when we're starting to look at our budget. So I'm either going to congratulate or put my head in my hands. Kerry?
Thank you, Chair.
Ms. Kerry.
No, we haven't closed anything. It's the savings that we've made on our Treasury management budget. So that's the budget by which we manage our cash flow. So through our strategy of trying to keep long-term borrowing to a minimum, any new borrowing while interest rates are still high, we're taking advantage of short-term borrowing, and those are the savings that are accruing to the council through the money that we spend on our debt, but also the money that we receive on any of our cash balances.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to say well done, and you know, that's good, if you like, taking fiscal responsibility for what we've got and how we can absolutely move on. Brilliant, brilliant news. Thanks a lot.
See. No further comments, no further questions. So I have proposed, it has been seconded. Those in favour of noting this, please show. That's Chris, that's unanimous. Thank you. And we will have a verbal update on the budget setting. Is this Kerry? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a verbal update for you on where we are with the budget process since the previous of the last PFR committee. This has been prepared in conjunction with Section 151 officer, who is unavailable tonight as he's on annual leave. So since we last met, the budget consultation has been launched, and that has been launched to coincide with the consultation on the local council tax support scheme as well. Consultations for 8 weeks. We've held 4 informal briefings of the Policy Finance Resources Committee, as I'm sure you're all aware, and most of you have been at. We've gone through the overall timeline for the budget process. We've recapped on our budget gap and where we were estimating a saving of £2.5 million. We've looked at the potential impact, importantly, that the current year's overspending, which we've just been talking about, could have on that savings gap. On the budget gap, and therefore the savings that might be required for next year. And we've also looked through our assumptions and done some scenario planning. We've also taken an exercise across the council for all services to understand their likely pressures which will arise next year. So that includes some of the items which we're experiencing this year and we think are likely to continue into next year, and any new pressures which services are forecasting. That exercise has identified some £19 million worth of pressures, of which around about 10 million of them are unplanned and not built into our original forecast. So we're working through those. There will be a lot of scrutiny over the next few weeks of those potential cost pressures. We need to understand which ones are risks and which ones are likely to be with us actually, and how far we can mitigate those risks. We will also look at the next PFR informal meeting next week with directors at savings options which have been identified to date. Directors will continue to identify further savings, so that position is changing on a regular basis, and we'll obviously update you with the latest information at that next briefing. And then following that briefing, we will start to plan with you the service engagement with the other service committees around the potential options to seek their views. on an informal basis. So that's where we're at, and that's our next sort of phase of work going through the budget process.
Thank you, Kerry. Any questions? No cheering. Yeah, it is what it is. Okay. Okay. Kerry, thank you for that. We appreciate that. We know we have some informals in our diaries for ongoing work on the budget as we move through into the difficult process next year. Thank you for that update. We'll move on to the proposed changes to the Island Planning Strategy, page 271. I'm going to read the recommendation. I'll look for a seconder. What we'll do is I'll read the recommendation, ask for a seconder. We'll move into questions, debates, or any proposals to change, and I'll ask our officers to present some of that to us. So the recommendation is that the committee agree to propose changes to the submitted version of the Island Planning Strategy set out in paragraphs 21 to 42 and appendices 1 to 5, and then the full council be recommended to agree to proposed changes to the Island Planning Strategy, that a period of public consultation takes place, a minimum of 6 weeks, on the proposed changes, and that the proposed changes and any comments made during the public consultation are sent to the Planning Inspectorate, and that full council delegate any final editorial and presentational revisions to the proposed changes to the Island Planning Strategy prior to public consultation and subsequent submission to Planning Inspectorate to the Strategic Director of Community Service, so long as they do not materially alter the intention of the proposed changes agreed by full council. I'd like a seconder. Thank you. Councillor Garrett seconded it. Well, it's a proposal. It's been seconded. We'll discuss comments and any proposals for changes be made. Do you want to ask the officer to present first, or would you like to ask a question first?
That's fine. I would have thought you wanted to make at least one alteration to that recommendation. That was what was confusing me.
I'm happy to take that now before we move on, if you wish. Do you want to make that suggestion, Councillor Stevens?
I've been vocal over this, along with quite a number of people in Ryde. I'd like to see the recommendation through the paper for Ryde Town Hall and the adjacent or adjoining property to our historical town hall to be withdrawn from the paper. No explanation needed, just to withdraw that. There are plenty of other areas within the boundary of Ryde and indeed the East White to take up the slack if there or excuse that expression, but take up the situation of providing other opportunities for residential development, and that's both in the Ryde area and indeed the eastern or northeastern side of the Isle of Wight.
So I'm hearing that I'll come to you, Ian, or as you're seconding, you're proposing that we remove item 8 on appendix 6D, page 1, where we have a revision paper. You are proposing we remove that entirely from the proposal this evening to full council. I'd like a seconder for that. Councillor Wall seconded that. Any comments on that? If not, I'll just ask whether we wish to accept it. Councillor Bacon, then Councillor Ward.
Well, Chair, it's a very brief comment, and my hand was up to second that because I think it is absolutely the right suggestion. We've had a public question on this. It's an important heritage asset, but I also think it is something where I understand that there's the chance of it coming back as a major cultural asset for the island as well, and I would be seriously concerned about any steps being taken that could be put that at risk. And so for that reason alone, but there are many other arguments, I would support what Councillor Stevens has said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. Councillor Ward.
Chairman, I really want to make a broader issue. Quite clearly, you ride members that know the building intimately and the area intimately. And I was just going to say, I think it would be good if the planning consultation actually included the local member along the line. I know we can consult, add to the consultation, but that's not quite the same thing as involving the local member. That's it, really.
I think it's a point well made. I'm sure we'll refer that to the planning team to consider, look at, and try and encompass our well knowledged views, Ian, for each of us in our wards. Yeah, Ed.
Thank you, Chair. I entirely support the removal of part 8 of that report, i.e. the removal of the Ride Theatre development. But my question is there any sort of also rans in terms of schemes that almost made this list that could replace the numbers that we've lost? Is that to come in a report? It's coming in the report. So should we listen to that?
Yeah, okay. Just before I do that, if I bear with me, if we're finished with this proposal, can we vote on it and then then becomes part of our proposal and then go to questions? So vote
The amendment.
So a vote on the amendment to be, okay. Those in favour, it's been proposed, it's been seconded. Those in favour, please show. That's unanimous, thank you. That is now part of our main proposal. Let's move back to your right. I'll come to you, Chris, after. Ed's had a question about alternative sites. Do you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. And I think if the committee were so minded, and obviously you voted on that proposed amendment to that, the simplest way of covering that off, if you like, would be to increase the windfall allowance per year. So if those of you at the briefing session on Tuesday, we discussed that around windfall housing, so sites where we don't necessarily know where they are at the moment, and given the numbers involved and the 18 that we identified on that site, then should members consider that the best way forward, then an adjustment to the windfall allowance every year, say up to 115 from 110, which is in Appendix 1 to your papers, would probably be the best way to cover that off as part of that, if that makes sense.
Happy with that? I'm happy with that. Chris. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Chris.
For some time now, there have been discussions going on about the hotel sites that are protected by conservation areas for tourism. It would seem that this is maybe an opportunity to revisit some of that, whether it's a general relaxation or actually looking at specific sites like maybe Royal York, the hotels in Sandown, Seafront, on the Esplanades. That will give you a big buffer of numbers on properties that it appears to everyone around the place, I think officers as well, that are not going to be reopened as hotels. And it seems that this might be an opportunity to score some brownie points with the inspectorate of actually finding some numbers that you can actually probably almost guarantee to deliver, because some of those developers have been waiting for years for us to relax that and allow them to start developing some of these sites.
Chris, thank you for that. Well made point. Before I go to Councillor Jarman and then Councillor Blake, is there something you want to say about that? I know that there has been comments informally about how do we release some of the hotels or take a view? What policies and strategies are in place that are approachable?
Thank you, Chair. And I think it's probably worth just opening up on this with what we're here for tonight and the timescales involved, because that's fundamental to this conversation. So what we're looking at the moment is some changes for the first 5 years of the plan. We're trying to address a housing shortfall in the next 5 years effectively. So Councillor Quirk's absolutely right. There are obviously a number of sites that you would think potentially could come forward. What we've got to be almost as certain as we possibly can be is that the sites we promote at this or we include at this moment in time will deliver housing in the next 5 years, because if they don't, they're not going to help us at this stage. And the challenge you have with some of those sites that you referenced is that there may well be a position down the line when they do come forward for something different, but whether that's within the next 5 years is probably quite doubtful, because fundamentally those sites have got to be promoted to us by the landowners for alternative uses, and at the moment they haven't been. And the other angle to it is obviously that actually developing a scheme and getting the finance to develop a scheme on a site like that can be quite a long thing to go through. Obviously, you've got all the costs associated with demolition, potential contamination as well. So solving all of that and delivering the houses on the site within 5 years is very, very challenging, which is why we've taken the approach that we have in the package that you've got in front of you tonight. That the sites that are in there at the moment to address the shortfall are ones that you'll see from the size of them. None of them are over 40 units. So they're all sites that we are confident will come forward and deliver within the next 5 years. I think what happens after that 5 years is probably the right period to be thinking around some of those longer term solutions around some of those historic sites that might then come forward from that. And as you'll see from your papers, even if we get the IPS adopted, we'll have to start work on the new plan straight away, and we're going to need more sites to cover that off. So that's where those kind of sites would come in. That's a very long-winded way of answering the question, but hopefully it's helpful.
Thank you. I think, Chris, you speak for yourself, but I think what Councillor Quirk was suggesting was it not necessarily specifically about hotels and the proposals that are in front of us, but that more generally we are curious as to why some hotels can't. I heard the demolition, not even demolition, conversion to apartments. So I think that's a question, and what's preventing that? Not necessarily can we have those numbers in this plan tonight? Nobody's saying that.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, so the policies in the IPS at the moment already are a relaxation from where we are in the core strategy. So at the moment in the core strategy, we're quite stringent in terms of the marketing periods and the kind of hurdles we expect a hotel to go through before it's released for another use. Policy E8 in the IPS relaxes that already. So we've already got that in the submitted plan. So it is already easier, or would be if these policies came into force, for a hotel to change to an alternative use if it came to us. So that's already in there. So I think hopefully that provides some comfort on that.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Councillor Jarman, Councillor Blake, and then Councillor Mossel, and then Councillor Garrett. Can I just ask final question? Are there strategies we're not aware of that prevent this from happening, conversion of hotels? Policies and strategies that we are not aware of, we being us as a committee, not you.
So again, this was something that was touched on during examination hearings. So within the IPS as submitted, there are two what are called core tourist accommodation areas, one within Shanklin and one within Sandown around the seafront. Following the examination hearings, the inspectors asked us to, and within those, we're effectively looking to protect tourist accommodation. They are pretty small areas in Shanklin and one in Sandown. The inspectors asked us to go and have a look at those areas and almost do a kind of an audit of every single property within them and what their current use was. And we're awaiting the inspectors' kind of view on that work. That's not part of this work at the moment. It may come later down the line as part of their main modifications, and I suspect there probably will be a change. I can't guarantee it, but that's where the direction of travel was.
Thanks for clarification. Councillor Jarman.
Chair, thank you for coming in a bit. Before I move us on to another topic, could I suggest that you might want to take questions from any other councillor, I include Councillor Monsell in this, which are carrying on with the same topic before we move on. Thank you.
I'll come back to you, Councillor Blake.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a few points on that. I would argue that brownfield is arguably more deliverable because there's less theoretical objection from local residents compared to greenfield sites, and I totally agree that there are more sites out there that would be up for conversion rather than demolition. I do think demolition is a tricky path. That is going to slow us up, particularly if we're looking at a 5-year timescale. However, if we were to signal that we are interested in looking at those buildings, I think that would encourage landowners to come forward. So I think at the moment, rightly or wrongly, there's this belief that the council won't allow that, the LPA won't allow that. So I think if we just at least signal our intent that we want to look at these sites, that would be very useful. I'd also, to that end, encourage local place plans to be created as much as possible. I know there's some across the island that are going ahead, but for local areas to signify where they want that their town or area to go, I think it is of great use. And I'm certainly looking to encourage my area to take up such a thing. I know there's ones going forward in Cowes and the Bay currently, and possibly others, but I think that's very key, and that builds into a whole island strategy as well, ultimately. And I think we also have to be acutely aware that accommodation needs have changed. We don't, well, the general public don't necessarily want a hotel anymore. There is still people out there who do, but you look at Ventnor, for instance, we have very few hotels compared to how we used to, and we are, in some cases, people would say, plagued with Airbnbs and of the ilk. But that is the demand of the current tourist, that they want something that's self-contained, a bit more flexible to their needs. And I think that being so rigid in our approach isn't aiding regeneration. It is actually it's stymieing the area's ability to adapt and grow. And if there's a couple of derelict buildings either side of a functioning hotel, then that hotel will be degraded by the fact that it's surrounded by poor state of buildings in the area. And it'd be much better to see that building returned to at least a visibly good state than left to rot, because we'd like to see it as a hotel one day. And I think that's very, very negative.
Thanks, Ed. Councillor Mosdale.
Thank you. I think we've only got to walk through Sandown and Shanklin at the moment and see that the issues that some of these properties are causing. We know how much it costs the police. We know, policing, the vandalism and the fire brigade, the issues that are happening within these buildings. And actually, I know we say, we're saying, it's not part of the 5-year plan, but if you were a property developer, what you want to know is that planning have an understanding of how things stack up financially. That if you go with a proposal that says, okay, I can do this within a year, I can get it demolished, you help me with this process, but you need to understand what we need to do as developers to say, this is what we need to go to the bank with. And I think you'll find that doesn't take 5 years to do, but what we do need to do is say to those property owners within the town that we are going to relax that. We're going to look at those properties. We understand the economic detriment that it's causing to the towns. Yes, Councillor Blake's completely right. Airbnb, if I were going to look at staying somewhere now with somebody who's got a reasonable expendable income, I would look at an Airbnb. I would not come and stay in a town where there are lots of empty, burnt out, derelict buildings that I know are causing a problem. So it's a vicious circle at the moment, but we do need to actually, if we go down this route, give a really clear message that we are open to business, we understand business, and we understand the financial pressures of being able to borrow to do a development at the moment. If we can show that we understand that and we support developers with their business plan, that we don't list a whole onerous catalogue of hurdles that they have to go through that incur them financial costs before they actually even go and see an architect, then I think we will see far more stuff coming through. But we have to show that we have a level of financial understanding and understand as well that it is, one, the costs incurred to us as a wider council of not doing anything is costing us a fortune, but actually trying to borrow money to do stuff at the moment we need to support rather than hinder. I just think it is so important for us, especially in our coastal towns at the moment that need that help to actually pull the standard up, but also to help our other services that are being implicated on what is becoming.
Thanks, Claire. Councillor Garrett.
Chair, I would be moving away from this area, particularly around hotels. So I think you've got Councillor Jarman first.
I think we've given it a whirl anyway,
Okay.
Unless Councillor Jarman wants to also talk about hotels. Okay, Councillor Garrett, and then I'll come back to Chris after.
Oh, okay, thank you, Chair. If I may be strategically parochial, I want to bring up the two allocations in my ward. They both are on Horsebridge Hill. One is land in adjacent to the current build, as you'll all be very aware of, at Three Oaks. It moves at great pace in some ways and other ways not so. But I understand that that site there is very much linked in with the Three Oaks development, and we must remind ourselves that Three Oaks development is fundamentally delivering something that we were talking about earlier, which is the social housing side of housing provision on the island, and it is good to see that is happening, and let us hope that this further provision does indeed achieve the same ends on that. The other allocation is on land that would benefit from, I think, from a housing bill. But I think this is where I want to move on to the strategic side of things. Horsebridge Hill, Parks Road, Cowes Road, Newport Road, through to Cowes is a strategic route for the Isle of Wight. 7.31 in our draft island planning strategy identifies the need for a supplementary planning document, master planning that area. I'm quoting from it now, holistically planned and funded, etc., looking at infrastructure provision and whatever. And then that moves us on to anticipating things that would arise from allocating these sites as well. We should remember, of course, that the actual planning permission originally granted for Three Oaks was for 203 housing units. That is reduced. What would be added to that area now wouldn't take us above that 203. But there are issues there, and the junction build was a response somewhat to this, to traffic management. But there's also the outstanding document, which is the speed review. And the speed review identified that Horsebridge Hill met broadly the criteria for a reduction from 40 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour. And I'm sure all of us are aware, from January the 16th next year, for about 11 weeks, we're going to be back into the roundabouts situation of the one-way closure and diversion whilst Southern Water put in their new main. So what I would say here is, should we be anticipating potential development on those sites to do things that we can do in the more holistic side of things, expedite the speed review aspect for Horsebridge Hill, make sure discussions with Southern Water recognise that anything that they do underground can ensure that any linkage through to the main water mains infrastructure doesn't mean we go digging up that road again, because I think well, I haven't got much hair left to pull out, but I've pulled it. But metaphorically, we pulled a lot of hair out in our frustrations at what that means. Understandable frustrations, but can we also, out of these discussions tonight, make sure we are anticipating knock-on effects, and the same will be true of a lot of the allocations already in the DIPs, and may well be true of some of those additional allocations. But I beg your forgiveness for being parochial, but hopefully strategically so, about for all those people who have suffered some great transport pain and are about to go through that again in early January. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. We do many of us have suffered your parochial pain, frankly, in transport issues. Councillor Jarman.
Thank you, Chair. I'd echo what Councillor Garrett has said. It does make a great deal of sense if we're allocating it with an expectation of work to be done, that where utility companies are putting measures into effect, that they also anticipate the same measures that we're bringing forwards. Sorry if I'm paraphrasing you a great deal here, but there we are. So my question comes back down to the tables which are on page 274, 275 in the pack, which relate to the calculation over the 5 years of the plan. On page 274, and I'm echoing back here quite some time to the hearings we had with the inspector, and also to the delay, which the 6-month grace period that we were given. I wanted to check when the period of the plan is, because on page 274, we still indicate that we are already halfway through, if not 3/4 of the way through the first year of the plan. And I wanted to know if the plan, given that we're now talking about putting it to full council, and we're then talking about a 6-week consultation, by the time we've done the consultation, the plan goes into the inspector will be at the end of January. In reality, year one is gone. I'm sorry, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but that's just how I see it. And if that's the case, then given the other numbers we hear about delivery expectations for this year anyway, which are likely to be in the, well, probably starting with a 2, I think was the phrase the other day. I don't want to echo the numbers too greatly, but similar to the 262 that we had last year, of which only 19 were affordable. If the numbers this year are below that, but still starting with a 2, we're clearly in the first year of the plan a long way away from the 703 figure. So my question is, does that mean the reality is that the 5-year plan will now be put back a year and will start 2006-07, or does it mean that the actual numbers we have to achieve get concatenated in the remaining 4 years of the plan, including, for example, windfalls?
Yeah, please, James.
Thank you, Chair. So very good question, Councillor Jarman, and I'll refer to my spreadsheet, which I've got in front of me now. So with lots of numbers on, but
I should say, Chair, sorry to interrupt you, James.
That's right.
If it's better that you come back with an answer on that rather than delving into spreadsheet calculations today, I'm happy to do so. Thank you.
It's fine. I'm just looking at it to help you with the answer. So effectively, the first 5 years of the plan will start in 25-26, so this financial year. What we won't do is lose what gets built in this year. So if, for example, we followed through and the plan got adopted at some point next year in 2026, then the kind of first year would be 25-26. So whatever gets built in that year would count in terms of that 5-year period. So obviously we've talked about a couple of sites that are underway already at the moment, delivering homes this year, which will be completed this year. So we'll be counting them as part of that 5 years. So that hopefully that answers the question. It will be 25-26, and everything that gets built in that year counts in the 5 years.
So sorry, Chair, just to clarify. So the plan is including this year. It's effectively it's already started in reality, hasn't it then? So what would happen is that the number that we would have to meet in the spreadsheet, which is on page 275, the numbers get concatenated into the remaining 4 years of the plan. If the number this year is, say, pick a number, 250, just a random number, then we would only allocate 250 against the total number we have to achieve in 5 years, which would mean that the numbers for the remaining 4 years would have to absorb that differential. And the longer we don't meet the target, the greater the concatenation occurs. Andrew's looking at me at the corner of his eye here because he's also a bit of a mathematician. So am I on the right track here, or am I got it completely wrong?
Thank you, Chair. No, you're absolutely on the right track, and you're making the point I was trying to make to the inspectors during the examination hearings, is that we're getting judged on something that's out of our control, i.e. which is the number of houses that actually get built. But nonetheless, you are correct. Effectively, whatever number we build in 25-26 will be year 1 of the plan. Year 2 is whatever gets built. Year 3, year 4, year 5. I think it's worth just referencing that we are expecting more developments come forward in kind of years 3 to 5 of the plan, and those who are at the hearings will remember that obviously the development sector is very keen to have a plan in place, because that helps, again, Councillor Mods's point earlier around investment and certainty. So having that plan in place, having allocations, makes people a bit more comfortable in taking that financial risk of investing to develop. So we are expecting it to kind of effectively go like that. So there'll be more, there'll be probably over, as we're projecting, over kind of 500, 600, 700 per year in those last couple of years. So there may well be a under the 703 in years 1 and 2. We may go over that in years 4 and 5, and it kind of balances out. Maybe that answers the question.
Thank you. One more question.
So just to follow on, so it's still on the same topic. So I understand about backloading the plan and the concatenation. So I'll accept what you said there. I think what that does is it further emphasises the need for a more liberal approach about some of the other buildings that we've been talking about, hotels, etc., on that, so that they can be added. Because I would suspect that that some of those hotels, etc., that we've been talking about could be brought forward within that 5 years of the plan, rather than, an aid to that backloading.
Thanks, Chris. I think it's a point made. Did you just want to respond to that, James, and then I'll move on
Yeah, Yeah,
a bit? I'm going to
just-
come to it.
Just very quickly, that obviously, the members must remember there's three elements to our housing supply. So sites that have already got permission, sites that we're looking to allocate, and also that windfall allowance that we touched on earlier. So, the stuff we don't know about, so perhaps a hotel being converted to B&B being converted, a bit of backland being developed, we just don't know. That's that windfall allowance we've got at the moment. Proposing to have 110 a year for those first 5 years in there. So obviously that's built into that supply chain, if you like.
I think what I'm sensing about this hotel, and I'm not going to go back on this, but I'm sensing is, what do we need to do that allows hotels to be converted into accommodation? I think that's what I'm hearing anyway. Ed?
To pick up on the numbers per year, we already sort of pretty much agreed between us that in reality we would very soon be under special measures because there's a rule that's 75%. But at what point will that happen? And surely that's now expedited by the fact that this year's lack of home buildings adds so much to the next 4 years that surely almost immediately after we approve this, or should we approve this, we'll be in special measures and it becomes null and void.
You're absolutely right, Councillor Blake. So the housing number the inspectors have asked us to work within this plan is 703 a year. Until the island builds 75% of 703, and excuse my maths, I can't work that out in my head straight away, but roughly around 500 and something. Until we build that for 3 years in a row, we will remain under the presumption in favour of sustainable development. There's no getting away from that fact, and that again, that's something I tried to measure on in the hearings. That if you set the number too high, you're kind of almost setting us up to fail. But that's what the inspectors have told us to do.
So I mean, this might be a rhetorical question, but why the hell are we going through this if it's not going to lead to something we can actually work with?
Potentially, what we're being offered by the inspectors here is an interim approach for the next 5 years, because if we stop work on this plan, then the housing number is now 1,104 a year. So that's where we would go to. So whether we agree with it or not,
it might as well be 3 million a year for the. What's the
100% agree with you, but unfortunately, the inspectors during examination hearings have not gone with that, and we are where we are with the standard method, unfortunately.
Ian, Claire, and Councillor. I'm saying to you, Ian, speak. Then you, Claire. I'll allow Pete Spink, Councillor Spink, to ask a question after the committee's spoken and asked its questions. That's my process. Ian Stevens, Councillor Stevens. Claire.
Thank you. I think we do get really fixated on housing numbers with this, and we completely forget that there is so much good within the plan. And that does really worry me, that we just have these huge discussions about stuff that we know is challenging. We know we're in special measures. We know this is an interim, but actually it has frustrated me for so long that the amount of work that's been put in some really, really good policies just gets forgotten about and overlooked, and we just have this ongoing cycle of how many houses are going to be built. And I hope when this does go to full council, we have a reminder to all those councillors how much good is there and actually how much is needed. And if we don't, I know I hear people saying, what is the point of this plan? Well, the point of this plan is to get the really good stuff across the line. That's the point of it. And I will be reiterating that quite forcefully in full council.
Thanks, Claire. That's good points made. I'm going to ask Councillor Spink to ask this question. Just before you do, Councillor Spink, firstly, it needs to be about, I'm going to remind us that I've tried to be as flexible as I can. What we're discussing is proposed changes to the draft island policy, not the island planning strategy per se, and that the question that Councillor Spink asked must be related to the proposed changes to that, and that we will afterwards, because we spent some time on discussing hotels and numbers, there are some other changes that are being proposed that I'm going to ask our officers to explain to us. But Councillor Spink, please, and then we'll move on to the officers. Thank you for your patience, Peter.
No, that's all right. Thank you, Chair. Really, it follows on from Councillor Mosdell's comment about there being lots of matters in the plan that are good. One of the matters that is in the plan but is now being proposed to be deleted is C11, which is building houses that are environmentally friendly, as it were, and consistent with proposals for climate change. So the proposal is that this committee should agree that C11, which is one of the good bits, I would suggest, is deleted. And I wonder if the committee would consider whether or not it will recommend the deletion of C11. I would
Thank you,
suggest
Councillor
that
Spink. I'm going to ask our officers to respond to that on behalf of the committee, but on behalf of you as officers and your proposals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, just following up on Councillor Spink's point, obviously there are a number of, well, effectively 5 changes which are in front of the committee tonight. One of those is the proposed deletion of policy C11, which was requiring all new development to meet net zero thresholds. So this was something the inspectors were relatively, perhaps forceful is the wrong word, but relatively forthright in their hearing, post-hearings letter to us, recommending that we delete the policy or water it down significantly because it does not align with current national standards through your building regs and the future home standard, which is coming from government. So we did do some work on this, looking at the potential to retain it and the implications of that. There are a couple of authorities who are taking similar policies through, but they are generally, well, they are on area action plans. They are around one specific large development, let's say for 2,500 houses in Essex, where viability is not quite as much of an issue. So they can kind of almost get it through because they can make it work. That's the other element to C11, is the viability aspect to it. And members will see from the papers that actually the costs of meeting the building regs as they are today have gone up probably 25% already. So if you add on another sum of money on top of that, which you have to do to get to the net zero thresholds, then obviously that further affects viability. So members will see that one of the proposed changes is to reduce the affordable housing percentages in some areas. If we added in further costs on top of what's already in there, then those percentages would have to come down even further. I think I'll just finish on this point just around a recognition of the timescales we're looking at here. So this is effectively a 5-year plan. That's what the inspectors have offered us the ability to effectively take through. So this particular policy, this topic around net zero, is something that will continue to evolve. The technologies around reaching those net zero targets will start to become cheaper over time as they become more mainstream. So it may well be when we're looking at the next version of the plan, which will probably be in 2 years' time when we start looking at the work into it, we'll be able to look at this and bring it back in a refined form that works from a viability perspective, and also there's a bit more learning for us to pick up on and use. So hopefully that's answered or at least made some of the comments back.
Thank you, Ollie. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is just expand on the other proposals to the committee, please. So, wait.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add to that, I think I'd like to make the point that officers have recommended this policy deletion reluctantly. We are very much supportive of this policy and the approach, but however, having listened very carefully to what the inspectors have told us and gone away and, as James has said, to look at it in a lot of detail, we think on balance that we won't be able to get this approach through. But what I would say is for members of the committee to be assured that this simply isn't just removing the requirement and then houses are built effectively willy-nilly without any sort of protections in this matter. There are other processes, such as James has mentioned, such as building control requirements that build in very similar sort of sets of requirements. So there are those points, they are picked up, but they're just being dealt with by a different process at a different time. Thank you, Chair.
Dolly. Do you, James or yourself, just expand a bit? We have a paper which is a summary of the proposed changes. Is this a public paper or is this just for the committee? Yeah. So would you just like to explain to the committee some of those changes? Because we've discussed some of it, but not all of it. And there are some fundamental changes you're proposing in that we'd like to understand and consider.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So effectively, there were 5 areas that the inspectors asked us to look at, and I'll go through all 5 areas in a bit of detail, but not too much. So the first one was around the housing shortfall. We've touched on that already. So that's effectively 315 homes we've got to find over the next 5 years, in addition to what's in the plan already. And so we're proposing to do that through 2 methods. One is the 9/8 additional sites that we would put forward, that we deliver in those next 5 years. And the second one is an increase in our windfall allowance from 100 a year to 110 a year. And that's effectively picked up through a policy, changed it to policy G2, which is effectively where stuff can happen on the island, if you like. And again, this talks to something that the inspectors were very, very hot on in the examination hearings. So some of those, the rural service centres in the assessment hierarchy, where we've got primary, secondary, rural service centres, how are we going to help those areas be supported in terms of the communities there and the facilities in there? So we're proposing that the change to policy G2 is that if you're within or immediately adjacent to a rural service centre, and that site immediately adjacent to a rural service centre is under 10 homes and is meeting a specific local need that has been identified, then that would be accepted in principle. So that's a change from the submitted version of the plan. So they were the 2 methods of addressing that housing shortfall. The second area of work is again probably the biggest headline one, which is around the viability report, which supports the plan. So this is one of the many pieces of work that supports a local plan. We have to do a full plan viability study that effectively looks at what's the cost of a developer meeting all of the policies in the plans, all of the things we ask of a development, whether it be a contribution to health, education, transport, affordable housing. That's all a cost. What does that all add up to? And at the end of it, can a developer still make a profit on a scheme and therefore take a scheme forward? So that viability report has been updated. It focused on a number of the areas the inspectors asked us to look at very closely from the examination. So bill costs, the costs of section 1 and 6, cost of meeting build regs, affordable housing transfer values. So I'm sure members won't be surprised to hear that all of those things have kind of either gone up or gone down to affect the development negatively. So build costs have gone up 20% in the last 2-3 years. We've got additional health contributions now, so our section 106 contributions have gone up. The cost of meeting building regs has gone up 25% in the last 2 or 3 years. So again, all of those things have added up to the fact that if we retain 35% affordable housing across the board, it's not viable. So developments would not come forward. And in some ways, that's reflecting what's happening on the ground at the moment. We've already spoken tonight about the low numbers of housings being delivered. One of the reasons for that is that we've got a lot of schemes with permission at 35% affordable housing. At the moment, they're just not viable because all the costs have gone up. So the way we're proposing to address that is to bring down that affordable housing percentage in some areas of the island. Not everywhere, because some areas can still afford to deliver that 35%, but some of the lower value areas can't. And you'll see from Appendix D, I think it is, it sets out where those higher value and lower value areas are and what those percentage reductions are. I think it's probably extremely worthwhile pointing out that through this plan process so far, we've got policy AFF1 in the plan, which is looking at getting those deeper discounts to affordable housing. So not using the definition of affordable housing that the government used, which is 80%, but setting our own island affordable definition, which is 70, 65 and 60%, depending on size. That is maintained. So we're keeping that in there, but it's just the percentage of affordable housing a site has to deliver that is coming down. So that's the approach that is in front of you tonight. We've touched on the deletion of policy C11, so I won't repeat that. And then the other change within the plan itself is change to policy EV5, which again was a recommendation for the inspectors. That's the buffer to ancient woodland, which we set at 50 metres. Standing advice from Natural England and Forestry Commission is minimum of 15. And the inspectors said basically we've got to take it back to 15. So that's what we've done. And then finally, last one, I won't bore you with anymore, is the sustainability appraisal, which is a document of hundreds of pages which supports the plan. As I said to you on Tuesday, if you've ever read one, well done, congratulations. But we have to make sure that that's in a format that these inspectors were happy with. So we've done some additional work, quite a lot of work on that, to make sure that we've done that in line with what the inspectors wanted. So that's a whistle-stop tour of what in it. It's probably worth just finishing on the kind of the timetable and next steps and what the implications are. So obviously we're here tonight discussing it. The proposal is to go on to full council to agree those proposed changes. If that happens, we carry out 6 weeks of public consultation, which will take place from the 1st of December and run through to the middle of January. Ideally, we don't do it over Christmas, but unfortunately we are hamstrung by what the inspectors said to us. We are in a 6-month pause. The likelihood of that being extended, we've already extended a little bit beyond 6 months because we took a while to make the decision back in May. So they're not going to extend it any further. We've got to go back to them by the end of January with what our proposed changes are and the comments we've collected on that. Once we've done that, if we do go back to them, the inspectors will then reopen the examination. They may carry out more hearing sessions on some of these topics, they may not. And then the next kind of formal step will be what's called the main modification. So all of these changes, plus all the other changes that came out of the examination hearings, there's formally 6 weeks of public consultation on those, which is run by the inspectors. And then after that, they produce their report. And again, the final stop always rests with full council. Even if the inspector's report comes back and says, yes, that plan is sound, you're free to adopt it, it is a decision of full council whether to adopt the plan or not.
Thank you, James. Whistle stop, very useful. Councillor Blake, Councillor Jarman after.
Thank you, Chair. I support all the changes that have been made to that report. I'm probably going to take Councillor Jarman's question out of his mouth, but can we please have a map attached, particularly to this bit around the G2 policy, just so we can understand the boundary differences. Think about my ward. It'd be quite useful to know exactly where those boundaries are.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Is that a suggestion? If we recommend that we're going to do something to full council, that map comes to full council, or would you like that?
Yeah, that'd be
anyway. Thank you. Thank you.
Just to confirm, yeah, we can provide a map of the rural service centres on a plan, so that goes to full council as well. So it's there as a visible representation of what that means, if that would help.
Judge, the request is for full council, if and when it gets to full council. Thank you. Chris.
Yeah, so I was going to ask a very similar question just to amplify that a little bit. First of all, the little 9 that we have above, could we please have those as at least an A4 size? I mean, my eyesight isn't perfect, but actually being able to read them would be very useful. And the other thing is, I noticed on the online document when I was trying to scale them, they just become very blurry. So if where we attach them into the document, if we could make sure that they're proper PDF imports or something and scalable would be, I'm sure technology people can deal with that. On the secondary settlements, which are Bembridge, Freshwater, Totland, Wootton and Ventnor, the same, if we can have an A4 map separate for each one of those, that would be useful. So one A4 for Ventnor, one A4 for Bembridge, one A4 for Freshwater and Totland. I think Freshwater and Totland probably share an A4, probably one for Wootton as well, just so that we can see the detail of where the boundaries are. Otherwise, it does become quite difficult to see which fields and which land is or is not included in it. And just to confirm that those are the only ones, that there are no others. So it's not an example that these are, that is the totality of it. Because my assumption is that when you immediately start work, your phrase, sometime probably very soon, if you've not already given some thought to it, to how we're going to have our post 5-year plan or post 4.5-year plan now for the 1100 odd numbers that we need to develop. I'm assuming you're going to add conspicuously a lot of other areas to this and embrace additional land as well. So one of the issues that will become quite important when you add in those charts for Bembridge, Freshwater, Totland, Wootton and Ventnor, effectively as adjacent land to adjacent land that was already included, will the 1104 then further extend those boundaries and be an adjacent to an adjacent to an adjacent land? Is that the way that it will work out? Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, please.
So just to clarify what's in front of the committee, there are no proposed changes to the secondary settlements. So the only change is the rural service centres and to allow small sites of up to 10 that meet a specific local needs being identified to come forward. So there's no change to the submitted plan to the secondary settlements. So we can provide maps of those if that's wished, but there's no change to what's submitted. That's not what's in front of the inspector, in front of the committee, or would be in front of full council. We've already got the maps for the 9 sites. They'll be on A4 141, so that's fine. I think in terms of the question around what comes next, simple answer is I don't know, because we've never looked at that level of housing on the island before, and we haven't started to do that. So that's not what we're here. We're here to look at the proposed changes to the IPS and what comes next beyond that. I simply can't answer because I don't know.
I think, Chair, as long as I'm happy with the answer, as long as we get the A4 maps for each of the areas, including the secondary settlements, that'll be fine. Thank you.
Ed.
For clarity on what I was requesting, so when you have a planning application in St Lawrence, half of it comes up as saying it's in Whitwell. So it's a point I've repeatedly raised, and that I'm repeatedly told that, oh, it's a problem with the national server says that half of St Lawrence is in Whitwell, which is infinitely annoying for local residents searching local planning applications. Half of it, they say, which is on Undercliff Drive, they say is in Knighton. So I'm quite keen to see where these maps are, because I would hate for half of St Lawrence to be included in Whitwell, for instance, and Knighton respectively.
Thanks, Ed.
Yep, that's not a problem. If it would aid members, then we can just provide an A4 map of every single settlement with the boundary, and we can put no change to submitted plan, no change to submitted plan all the way through, so you can see where the boundaries are. There's no change to what was submitted, and because there's no change to any of the settlement boundaries as part of this.
So I just think I understand the question is a visual, sometimes easier to understand what. Yeah. Look, we've had a good go at this. There are numbers of proposals. We've had a recommendation. I've read it out. It's been seconded. I'm going to ask you to vote. This is to recommend it to go to full council. We note that we have asked in our recommendation that item 8, the Ryde Town Hall Theatre, is removed from our recommendation. I hope that's been noted. On that basis, those of you that are prepared to propose this,
Sorry, Chair. I think when James sort of explained earlier, there was a potential or suggested consequential change to the proposal in front of you, which related to the specifically identified windfall number. So I think from what I heard from the conversation was that would be part of the recommendation.
We're happy to do that. Do you want those listed? Councillor Stevens, we'll list those for you if you wish. Is that what you're looking for?
It's simply as part of the recommendation that there will be a consequential change to the identified windfall site number, which went from 110 to 115.
Okay, we understand that. Hang on.
Thank you. Totally understood that the windfall number will go up to compensate, and we will withdraw the Ryde Town Hall section out of the recommendation. That's as I see it. I don't, and that is over the 5-year period anyway. Thank you.
And that will have a consequential effect on the table that I referred to earlier, which has got the calculation for the 5-year and the windfall numbers in it as well. So we don't not only have to agree that, we have to agree that the table will be, and the other elements relating to windfall in the document and the calculations of them. Thank you.
Ian, and then Jonathan.
Firstly, I've got to plead with Ollie and James that the hotel issue wasn't sponsored by me, but we did have that discussion, and I just wondered if we could note that there was a degree of flexibility possible. That's it really. If we can note that somewhere in the plan.
It's certainly recorded, but how can we elevate minutes to notes? Do we have a process for notes? This, I'm not sure. We will note it. Wendy will.
Chair, if I may, your discussion, that the point that you had a discussion about the need for flexibility in considering planning applications for change of use of hotel will be noted in the minutes. I think separately, the point was also made that even though we've got the potential new policy in the island planning strategy, that there may be further localised work that we can do with town and parish councils, local members, local hoteliers in Sandown and Shanklin in particular, to identify the opportunities for windfall sites to come forward as quickly as possible, which is a separate piece of work that can happen as well.
Sounds like an action point to me.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, the staff. Thank you, Ian, for that. It's comforting to hear that. Councillor Bacon.
Well, just with the aim of getting absolute clarity, should, following the amendment in respect of RIDE, should we have a formal proposal of amendment that the windfall number be increased to 115 plus any necessary consequential amendments to the
Jonathan,
documents?
thank you for that. We'd like that clarity. If you propose that, we'll deal with that. Councillor Bacon's proposing that amendment. That will be noted. Councillor Jarman has seconded that. Those in favour of that? Hang on. No, wait a minute. Let's get this right. Those in favour of that amendment, that change, thank you for that suggestion. Those in favour of that, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. We'll now go back to what we were originally doing. You happy with that? You're happy. Which was, we had a recommendation. We've now amended it to reflect that Ride Theatre's taken out, that we've adjusted the windfall sites. There was a seconder for that. And therefore, I'm going to ask you to indicate your support or not of that recommendation to go to full council. Those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you all. Thank you for a decent contribution for everyone there. Look. Let's move on to our final item, apart from the committee work plan, which is the proposed leases of Isle of Wight Council property as at November 25, page 305. Is there anyone here wants to speak to that of the officers? If not, we'll deal with this ourselves. Anyone want to speak? Simon?
Chair, I believe Mr. Haig is online and should have the ability to speak if you need him to address the committee.
Look, Graham, if you wish, do you want to at least comment, if not present the paper, at least comment to the committee? Claire's going to do it on behalf of Graham. Claire? Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, I should have put my hand up beforehand. I mean, essentially, all I wanted to say in terms of it by way of introduction of the report is obviously earlier this year, the full council, upon Policy Resources Finance Committee recommendation, approved a land and asset disposal policy, which had clear objectives in terms of ensuring that there was a proper process of review, and in doing so that the potential for things like capital receipts to be achieved, a special emphasis on viability assessments for social rent housing, as well as looking at the wider community benefit opportunities. So essentially, the process that we had intended would be followed is that we would be bringing to this committee a new schedule for you to consider in terms of that programme of work. However, the policy does acknowledge that there are potential ad hoc situations that may arise that need some intervention in between times. And this is one of those examples in terms of work that now falls within the remit of that policy. And in doing so, obviously, it fits within the scope element of disposal of land or property includes the granting of a long-term lease, which in the absence of having any specific criteria around that, we've taken the definition of that to be anything over 7 years, which is in line with what gets, approved by, is registrable with the Land Registry Authority. So what you have before you is a request to approve 5 lease renewals for Dell Beach Bar, Lower Hyde Holiday Park, Barton Multi-Use Games Area, Rue Valley Sports Centre, Blackberry Lane Preschool. And officers have given consideration to each of these leases, and the report itself sets to you those considerations, and the recommendation is that we should proceed to enter into those leases, but obviously happy to seek answers to questions if you haven't. And say Graham's online if we get into the technical realms. Thank you.
Just out of courtesy, Graham, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, thank you, Chair. I think Claire covered it all very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Has to go to full council, doesn't it?
That the recommendation is that full council, this is a recommendation, full council, not a decision, that full council be recommended to grant long leases in connection with Barton Multi-Use Games Area in Barton in Newport, that the Rue Valley Sports Centre and playing fields in Upper Ventnor, that Blackberry Lane Preschool in Cowes, that the Dell Beach Bar on Ryde Esplanade and the access road leading to Lower Hyde Holiday Park, Shanklin, be recommended to grant long leases. Now, I need a seconder for that. Councillor Quirk. Thank you. Any comments and questions? Councillor Stevens.
Long lease is 15 years, according to this. How long is a long lease?
7 years, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, longer than 7 years. Yeah.
more than 7,
Yeah.
shorter than 15.
I mean, it's entirely within the gift of this committee. If you wanted to make a recommendation to us of a suitable period of which you would want to be given, consideration to, that's within your gift.
The reason I say this is we get this before us. We don't, and okay, if it's longer than 7.5 years, what's tied into the leases as well, which I don't know. Are we looking at any on costs for the council? There's a road mentioned here. There's an access to Lower Hyde Holiday Park. I don't know whether resurfacing or drainage or any such thing like that is down to us. The Dell Beach Bar, once again, anything there that might be on cost? The Mugger at Barton Newport. Have we factored these? Are they factored in? I'm concerned that we'll sit here, we'll grant that, and then we don't know what's within the lease to actually say, is this authority safeguarded on certain aspects? That's all I want to say. Just point that out. Thank you.
Yeah, let me go to Councillor Bacon at this stage.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I struggled a little when I was reading this paper, partly because I've been through everything else first. But as I read it, we're simply being asked for want of a better word, permission to grant a lease of longer than 7 years. We're not considering the terms of any lease or the length of any other lease. It's a simple question, and we've got 5 examples blocked together for that grant. So I don't think it's appropriate for us to discuss the details of the lease. That's not really for us, is it? So there was some sort of initial confusion in my reading of the paper, but then my understanding is we're simply, as it were, giving leave for business to proceed and not to go into any minutiae on any leases. That's operational stuff that will be dealt with in the normal appropriate manner. That's really just a point of clarification for my
Thank you,
benefit.
Jonathan. And I'll come to you, Ed, if I may. I was going to comment on that, but allowed you to say similar. But what I think what's happened here is that the asset disposal policy has created a policy whereby all council assets have to be considered for social and affordable housing. And what's happened is that up to 7 years, that is not applicable under the policy if a lease is 7 years. Of course, most of the leases that we are looking at, and there will be more to come forward, are seeking longer leases for a whole host of reasons that keep renewing every 3 years or 5 years. Some of our leases are 25, 50, 125 years, some of them. And what's happened is this has been an unforeseen consequence of the policy that's been applied to buildings that quite obviously were never intended to be provision of social and affordable housing. In fact, roads are not going to have a house built on, beaches are not going to have houses built on, industrial sites at Riverside are not going to have houses built on. So this has been an unfortunate outcome that we're being asked to correct. And elsewhere, there will have to be a revision of the policy, I'll come to you, Ed, to prevent this, because this cannot have been the intention that buildings that this council own and are under lease, that the leases are not renewed. The detail of which, as Councillor Bacon has said, is for elsewhere to be discussed and negotiated. But what we're being asked to do is allow a longer lease under the asset policy that's in place to be granted, not the details of lease. Ed.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, entirely agree with what you're saying there, and I think that what has been laid out in front of us is actually a very clear way of putting that across in terms of a simple tick box, rather than a whole report into whether a site is suitable. For instance, obviously, in one of these 5 signifies Brackbury Lane Preschool as being something that we could potentially use for social housing. You know, whether we want to or not is another debate entirely, but it theoretically is possible. I entirely agree with you that things like the muggers that are on here should be excluded, but it is wording that sufficiently that there isn't things slipping through the net, which was the initial point of the policy. So yeah, there is a delicate balance to be found there, but I think we do need to flesh that out, because this is silly that we are holding up things like the 2 muggers. And I just want to touch briefly on the Rue Valley Sports Centre. I'd like to thank Councillor Stevens for his work when he was the cabinet member, for putting in things like the user agreements with the steering committee. That was something that the councillor for the area at the time and I were pushing for, and it was very good that that's put in. And I say it is lamentable that we're still 2 years later, effectively at the same stage of the potential owner not being able to get on and use that. So I welcome this report coming forward for us to thrust it back into the hands of officers and get these deals done.
Excellent. Councillor John, then we'll move on for this.
In effect, what we're doing is we're simply reviewing it here and we're bouncing it back to full council, which is what the policy requires it to do. So we're not agreeing a lease in any way. We're simply agreeing that it goes forward to full council for them to do. The question I have is that when we were under a leader in cabinet system, the cabinet member used to meet with whoever it was, Graham included here, he'll remember our sessions, and we would review often quite long lists of leases and come to some conclusion of what should happen to them. At the moment, there doesn't seem to be a process for member involvement in lease details, or I mean, I'm not just talking about small renewals, but bigger ones as well. And I wondered, what is the process now for, in the absence of a cabinet member, for the terms of those leases actually being reviewed at the member level?
Do you want to comment on that, Claire?
I mean, I think it's firstly important to say that the purpose of the policy was the intentions of the policy was to make sure that we don't miss any opportunities that are presented to us. So, the policy's right in that respect. What we've got is a situation where, perhaps because we haven't necessarily defined it in sufficient detail in terms of what do we mean by a longer term lease, that has potentially sort of just clogged the system up a little bit in terms of what might be more related to business as usual. So I think there's two ways in which that we can address the question that Councillor Jarman poses. The first one I referred to earlier is in the sense that what we need to bring to the committee is a schedule of things that allows you to see what we've got on the list and what we will focus on in terms of review against the policy criteria. I think the other potential solution, which I hope you might find useful, is for us to meet with the committee in terms of providing you with a briefing session that explores some of these things in more detail, that allows you to see the work that's actually going on within the property services team, and so that you've got oversight of the things that are taking place. And if there's things that need to be brought forward for more formal consideration at committee, that will allow that kind of in public consideration around specific things that members want to take a view on. If that helps.
Look, we're happy to accept that as an offer. I'm mindful that the detail of negotiating leases is problem.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. And in a sense, the negotiation bits is an operational element. And just to reassure members that, that is a very intensive process, and it involves legal, it involves, all relevant departments that are required to make a decision that enables us to feel confident that the council has got the best possible outcome and delivers what it's intended to do. But what we can do is just give you a very clear flavour of the work that's been done, and that may draw your attention to something that you want to consider more formally.
Thanks, Claire. We'll take up that offer. It needs to be just a light touch overview from us. We do not want to be involved in negotiations of leases. Any Councillor Steeves, then I'm going to go to the vote.
I'm sorry to come back. There was no intention from myself to actually say, look at dotting the I's and crossing the T's. My main concern was that the way the recommendation is written is that, and I'm not going to read it all, that full council be recommended to grant long leases in connection with, and then the list. I would have thought that subject to or something like that might have been a little bit better on the bottom, just to say subject to assurances, etc., etc. I don't know, but I mean that was all my thoughts. I know our officers. I know the officers involved. I know they're damn good officers. So I've got no real problem with it, but it's just making sure that things don't flip back on us just because we've said, yeah, go ahead and do this. But it's got to be subject to. And that's all I was going to say. And I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to die in a ditch over it. I can assure you of that. And let's move on. But that was my way forward. It's just actually don't let it rebound back on us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. You're okay. We'll take that forward as a light touch, brief overview of leases, of which there are probably thousands. There's certainly hundreds. This council has, including bits of road, Ian, here and there. I am going to move. We need to vote on that. So it's been. You've had the recommendation. It was seconded. Those in favour of recommending this full council, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. And finally, for us, our work upcoming. Worksheet. You'll notice the last one on our list is exactly that. The Land and Asset Disposal Policy Review is proposed for March next year and probably can't come soon enough. Any comments on the work plan? Any questions? No questions? No comments? Ed?
Only just, we talked about an informal thing that the budget setting will go through the committees first in some form before coming to us, rather than coming to us, going to them, coming back to us.
We did have this discussion, didn't we? This kind of confusion. That was my understanding. Do you understand what? 1 second, Ed. We'll confirm that next week at the briefing. We're aware of that. We don't want this circular between committees too much, particularly on the importance of the budget. But have no fear that this committee has the final recommendation to full council on the budget, whatever the process is. Any further comments? No further questions. It's 7:09. And thank you all and our officers for sticking with us and your support, as always, our administration oversight that we have, and for all of you, people that have looked in with interest at what we've done tonight, and Councillor Spink and Councillor Love that joined us as councillors. Thank you all. I'm closing the meeting 7:10.